Friends, gather round, for we have ourselves a real humdinger. On March 20th, 2025, President Trump, in a move that surprised absolutely nobody, signed an executive order to dismantle the Department of Education. Now, before you start celebrating or panicking, depending on your political leanings, it's not a complete shutdown. Think of it more like a messy divorce where everyone's arguing over who gets the good stapler. The Department of Education, established back in the Carter era, when bell-bottoms were cool, has long been in the crosshairs of Republicans. They argue that education is best left to the states, like some kind of delicious, locally sourced apple pie. This executive order is their chance to finally make that happen, or at least take a big bite out of the federal government's role in education. But hold your horses, because it's not as simple as just handing the keys over to the states and saying, "Good luck, kids." There's a whole lot of shuffling going on. Many of the Department of Education's functions are being transferred to other federal agencies, like the Department of Health and Human Services, which is now in charge of special education programs. Because, teaching kids with disabilities is basically the same as managing Medicare. The big idea behind all of this is to give states more control over how they spend federal education dollars. The Trump administration argues that this will lead to better outcomes for students because, as we all know, local bureaucrats always know best. They envision a world where each state can tailor its education system to the specific needs of its communities, like some kind of educational salad bar. But critics, and there are a few, worry that this could lead to a patchwork system where some students get a gourmet feast while others are stuck with a plate of wilted lettuce. They point out that states already have a lot of control over education and argue that this move could exacerbate existing inequalities. And then there's the issue of accountability. With less federal oversight, how do we ensure that states are actually using these funds effectively and not, say, buying every student a personalized jetpack? The executive order doesn't quite address that, which is about as reassuring as a doctor saying, "We're going to try something new, but don't worry, I'm sure it won't explode." Now, before you start burning your student loan bills in anticipation, it's important to note that not everything is going away. Core federal programs like Pell grants, which help low-income students afford college, and Title I funding, which supports schools in low-income areas, will remain. The executive order actually emphasizes that these services will continue uninterrupted, but the devil, as they say, is in the details. While the overall funding for these programs, at least for now, seems secure, it's unclear how exactly they'll be administered. There's talk of block grants to states, which could give states more flexibility but also less accountability. It's like giving your teenager a credit card and hoping they use it responsibly. And then there's the big question mark hanging over special education. The shift of responsibility to the Department of Health and Human Services has raised concerns about whether they have the expertise and resources to effectively manage these programs. Advocates worry about potential cuts to funding, weaker enforcement of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act idea, and less support for research and innovation in the field. Unsurprisingly, this executive order has been met with a chorus of criticism, legal challenges, and enough hand-wringing to knit a sweater for every student in America. Democratic leaders have denounced the move, arguing that it will harm students, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds. They're not alone. Lawsuits have already been filed, challenging the legality of dismantling the Department of Education and the decision to stop investigating civil rights complaints. Because, who needs to ensure equal access to education when we can have states' rights? And what about the people on the front lines of this educational earthquake? The Department of Education's workforce is being slashed by 50%, with thousands of employees losing their jobs. This includes staff from the Office for Civil Rights and the Institute of Education Sciences, who are responsible for investigating discrimination complaints and conducting research. The future of education in America is now a giant question mark. Will this radical restructuring lead to better outcomes for students? Or will it exacerbate existing inequalities and leave vulnerable students behind? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure, it's going to be a bumpy ride.